If you want to get more poetry into your life, why not start with some of the best poetry books there are? I've compiled a list of books by the best poets I know to help you jumpstart your reading. In some cases, I've chosen individual volumes that best represent an author's work, and in others, these selections of the best poetry books include works from ancient writers, though Shakespeare's time, to the Romantics and other 19th century poets, to 20th century poets, and finally to works from contemporary living writers. Take a look at the list and see if you have any favorite poets to add. Number 1. The Essential Rumi by Rumi. Rumi was a 13th century Persian poet, jurist, Islamic scholar, theologian, and Sufi mystic who lived in Konya, a city of Ottoman Empire. His poems have been widely translated into many of the world's languages, and he has been described as the most popular poet and the best-selling poet in the United States. Number 2. The Complete Sonnets and Poems by William Shakespeare. This is the only fully annotated and modernized edition to bring together Shakespeare's sonnets, as well as all his poems, including those attributed to him after his death, in one volume. A full introduction discusses his development as a poet and how the poems relate to the plays, and detailed notes explain the language and allusions. While accessibly written, the edition takes account of the most recent scholarship and criticism. Number 3. John Donne's Poetry by John Donne. John Donne was an English poet, preacher, and a major representative of the metaphysical poets of the period. His works are notable for their realistic and sensual style and include sonnets, love poetry, religious poems, Latin translations, epigrams, elegies, songs, satires, and sermons. Number 4. On Love and Barley. Haiku of Basho by Basho. Basho, one of the greatest of Japanese poets and the master of haiku, was also a Buddhist monk and a lifelong traveler. Each poem evokes the natural world, the cherry blossom, the leaping frog, the summer moon, or the winter snow, suggesting the smallness of human life in comparison to the vastness and drama of nature. Number 5. Songs of Innocence and Experience by William Blake. Blake was one of the finest craftsmen of his time, an artist for whom art and poetry were inextricably linked. He was an independent and rebellious thinker who abhorred pretension and falsity in others. His songs of innocence are products of this innocent imagination, untainted by worldliness, while the songs of experience resulted from his feelings of indignation and pity for the suffering of mankind. Number 6. Lyrical Ballads by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Wordsworth and Coleridge's joint collection of poems has often been singled out as the founding text of English Romanticism. Within this initially unassuming, anonymous volume were many of the poems that came to define their age and which have continued to delight readers ever since, including the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, the Lucy poems, and many more. Number 7. Selected Poetry by John Keats. Keats published 3 volumes of poetry before his death at age 25 of tuberculosis. His poetry and his remarkable letters reveal a spirit of questing vitality and profound understanding, and his final volume, which contains the great odes and the unfinished Hyperion, attests to an astonishing maturity of power. Number 8. Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. Leaves of Grass is the incomparable achievement of one of America's greatest poets, an exuberant, passionate man who loved his country and wrote of it as no other has ever done. Walt Whitman was a singer, thinker, visionary, and citizen extraordinaire. Number 9. Goblin Market and Other Poems by Christina Rossetti. An important and often quoted literary figure, the English poet Christina Rossetti wrote some of the most beautiful and voluptuous poetry in the English language. Like Emily Dickinson, she lived in self-imposed isolation, writing of God and lost love with a sensuality and passion that seemed to emanate from the soul. Number 10. The Complete Poems of Emily Dickinson by Emily Dickinson. Only 11 of Emily Dickinson's poems were published prior to her death in 1886. The startling originality of her work doomed it to obscurity in her lifetime. This book, a distillation of the 3-volume complete poems, brings together the original texts of all 1,775 poems that Emily Dickinson wrote. Number 11. Gerard Manley Hopkins. The Major Works by Gerard Manley Hopkins. Gerard Manley Hopkins was one of the most innovative of 19th-century poets. During his tragically short life, he strove to reconcile his religious and artistic vocations, and this edition demonstrates the range of his interests. Number 12. Robert Frost's Poems by Robert Frost. Robert Frost's Poems contains all of Robert Frost's best-known poems, and dozens more in a portable anthology. Here are Birches, Mending Wall, Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, Two Tramps at Mud Time, Choose Something Like a Star, and The Gift Outright, which Frost read at the inauguration of John F. Kennedy. Number 13. The Selected Poetry of Rainer Maria Rilke by Rainer Maria Rilke. Rilke is unquestionably the most significant and compelling poet of romantic transformation, of spiritual quest, that the 20th century has known. His poems of ecstatic identification with the world exert a seemingly endless fascination for contemporary readers. Number 14. Selected Poems by William Carlos Williams. A poet of astonishing range and inventiveness, Williams was at once a daring formal innovator, one of the band of modernists who transformed American poetry, and an intimate, sometimes savagely frank chronicler of the life and landscape of his native New Jersey. Number 15. Trilogy by Hilda Doolittle. The first book of the trilogy, The Walls Do Not Fall, published in the midst of the 50,000 incidents of the London Blitz, maintains the hope that though we have no map, possibly we will reach haven. Tribute to Angels describes new life springing from the ruins. And finally, in The Flowering of the Rod, faith and love and resurrection is realized in lyric and strongly biblical imagery. Number 16. The Poems of Marianne Moore. More than 30 years after her death, Marianne Moore continues to be one of America's most beloved poets. The poems demonstrate Moore's wide range of interests, moving from witty images of animals, sporting events, and social institutions to thoughtful meditations on human nature. Number 17. Selected Poems by Anna Akhmatova. Anna Akhmatova is among the most moving and revered voices in Russian literature. A poet of passion and conscience, she was persecuted after the revolution and under Stalin, but chose to remain in Russia and bear witness. Her works capture a rich emotional world. Poems such as A Ride and By the Seashore reflect a complex attitude to love or explore the duality of her own nature, while others, such as Courage and In 1940, evoke the horrors of war. Number 18. The Selected Poetry by Edna Street Vincent Millay. One of America's most celebrated poets, and winner of the Pulitzer Prize in 1923, Edna Street Vincent Millay defined a generation with her passionate lyrics and intoxicating voice of liberation. Number 19. 100 Selected Poems by E. E. Cummings. Contains 100 of Cummings's wittiest and most profound poems, harvested from 35 of the most radically creative years in contemporary American poetry. These poems exhibit all the extraordinary lyricism, playfulness, technical ingenuity, and compassion for which Cummings is famous. Number 20. Selected Poems by Langston Hughes. With the publication of his first book of poems, The Weary Blues, in 1926, Langston Hughes electrified readers and launched a renaissance in black writing in America. The poems Hughes wrote celebrated the experience of invisible men and women, of slaves who rushed the boots of Washington, of musicians on Lenox Avenue, of the poor and the lovesick, of losers and the raffle of night.